Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I declare an interest as a Thames Water customer. The reality is that Thames Water is bankrupt. It cannot pay its debts and it cannot meet its legal obligations to Ofwat, to the state and to its customers. And therefore, surely the right thing to do, Mr. Speaker, is actually to put it out of its misery, put it into special administration for £1. The shareholders and the debt holders know, caveat emptor, they've all blown their dough. Buy it for £1, it's a good deal for the taxpayer, then it won't have to pay huge, egregious rates of interest, and the taxpayer and the customers will be the beneficiaries.
Secretary of State.
Well, I would respectfully point out to the honourable gentleman that Reform cares so much about the problems facing our water system that they didn't even mention it once in their general election manifesto. And what he's proposing, nationalising the water sector, would cost in excess of £100 billion. That is money they would have to take away from services like the National Health Service that his constituents rely on. And I think they would be very ill-served by him if he were to take that funding away and push up waiting lists that we've just started seeing coming down as a result of this government's investment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As my neighbouring MP, the Secretary of State will know the level of outrage at the continuous failures from Thames Water, including a 5-day period earlier this year where residents in my constituency were left without water. Given this Labour government has introduced measures to make polluting water company executives criminally liable and to ban unjustified bonuses, does the Secretary of State agree we are finally seeing accountability brought back to the water sector?
Secretary of State.
Well, I thank my honourable friend and indeed neighbour for his question. I know what a strong champion he is for water on behalf of his constituents. His constituents, much like everybody else's, will benefit now from increased compensation when there are failures, but I do agree with him. One of the problems that we inherited from the previous government is that we had a failing system with no accountability at all. So it's quite right that we should have introduced new criminal liabilities and potentially prison time for polluting water bosses, and that we've given the regulator the power to ban those unfair and undeserved multi-million-pound bonuses they got away with under the Conservatives.
Johnny Maynard.
Mr. Speaker, does the Secretary of State agree with Thames Water's own expert advisor, Teneo, that the ultimate cost if the company goes into special administration to the government will be zero? Page 193 of the expert advice report.
Secretary of State.
The point is, there is a market-led solution on the table, and I expect Thames Water to follow through on that.
Yuan Yang.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's possible for an American private equity company to walk away from Thames Water, but my constituents cannot. When water companies' bosses fail, it's our residents who pay, in sewage discharge into rivers and in their crumbling pipes and drainage. I'm glad that the government has therefore taken bonuses off bosses who are failing. But what more can the government do to tilt incentives towards investment in our infrastructure so that my constituents get some relief?
Well, the problems that she points to are to do with a lack of investment throughout the entire period of the previous government. So I was delighted that just before Christmas we secured commitment to £104 billion of private sector investment. That is the single biggest investment into our water sector in its entire history, and will be the second biggest private sector investment into any part of the economy under this government. We are serious about clearing up their sewage mess.
Lincoln John.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thames Water are a massive stakeholder in my Spelthorne constituency. They're the biggest landowner. We have half London's drinking water and 4 raised reservoirs, and we've got a fair chunk of the Thames from Staines to Sunbury. For 11 months now, I've been trying to get a meeting with Thames Water. I appreciate that they've had 1 or 2 other things on their minds recently, but could the Secretary of State use his good offices to encourage Thames Water to meet with me?
Minister.
Well, I do agree with him that the water companies, Thames and all the others, should of course engage with MPs who are seeking to represent the interests of their constituents, and I would be very happy to approach Thames on his behalf to ensure that he gets the meeting that he is seeking.
Daniel Francis.
Speaker, like my colleagues, my constituents in Bexley and Crayford are gravely concerned about the increase in their water bills, but I'm also concerned with them about the impact on business. Crayford Town Centre has been closed again last month, the 3rd year in the trot, because of the rotting infrastructure. So what assurances can the Secretary of State give to my constituents that no matter what happens, that we'll continue to invest in that infrastructure to ensure that those kind of closures finally end?
So state.
Well, he will already be aware of the action that we've taken through the Water Special Measures Bill to give the regulator the power they need to ban the unjustified bonuses that the water bosses were able to pay themselves under the previous government. The era where you could profit from pollution ended when that government ended.
Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Green Party has campaigned for public ownership of water since the year dot, unlike certain cynical opportunists on the bench behind me, because we know that if you allow privatised monopolies to control our water, it's left infrastructure crumbling, waterways running with sewage, sky-high bills and shareholders laughing all the way to the bank. So can I ask the Secretary of State, given this obscene and fundamental failure, why is it that the government will not even consider bringing water back into public hands where it belongs?
So state.
The problems facing the water sector are to do with failures of governance and regulation, and we need to tackle the actual problems, not the imagined ones. If we were to seek to nationalise the water sector, it would cost in excess of £100 billion that would have to be taken away from services like the National Health Service or education. It would take years to unpick the current model of ownership, during which time there would be no investment and water pollution would get worse. And we know from the example of Scotland that nationalisation is not the answer, because they also have problems with pollution. We are going to make sure that our priority is pure water, not the purity of her ideology.
Peter Swallow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As Thames Water dumps sewage into the Cut and the Blackwater in my constituency, the Conservative government washed their hands not in it, but of it. This government is acting to ban bonuses, to issue the biggest fine from Ofwat we've seen, and to bring in criminal liability. But as we seek more action to get to grips with the crisis in Thames Water, will the Secretary of State commit to putting two things at the forefront of his mind? Firstly, our environment and cleaning up the sewage, and secondly, customers and making sure that we get a fair deal for our customers and our constituents.
I'm sure he'll be pleased to know that we've launched 81 criminal investigations into water companies for pollution and pollution failings and other failings. That is a dramatic increase from what we inherited from the previous government. I'm sure he will recall they cut the resources to the regulator in half. At the last budget, despite the appalling financial inheritance, we increased resources by 9%, and we've now introduced the polluter pays principle, so that where there is a successful prosecution of a water company, that company will pay the price of that investigation, so further investigations and prosecutions can follow.
But Era Wilson.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. Thames Water is teetering on the brink. Investors are running for the hills, and my constituents are paying the price for their mismanagement through soaring bills. All the while, Thames Water is spending hundreds of millions of pounds on a proposed sewage recycling project at Teddington Lock in my constituency on the River Thames, which will at best be used every 2 years, and some cynics would suggest is designed entirely to boost their balance sheet. This morning, the Secretary of State committed to my constituent Ian McNuff that he would come and visit the site to look at the impact of this proposed project. Could I ask him to reiterate that commitment today? And I and my honourable friend and neighbour, the member for Richmond Park, would be delighted to welcome him.
Secretary of State.
Yeah, as I said to her constituents, I would be very happy to come and visit if my diary allows. In any case, I would be very happy to make sure that she gets a meeting with the Water Minister to discuss her concerns around Teddington.
Inca.
Speaker, does the Secretary of State agree that it's come to something when the opposition seem to be suggesting that Thames maybe should not be sanctioned because it may put their preferred bidder at risk when they'd rejected the others? John Cunliffe suggested stronger regulation, not weaker. Isn't it clear that the direction this government is going in must be the right one?
Well, I do agree with her, because, of course, the whole mess we've inherited was because the previous government let the water companies get away with it. They were paying themselves multi-million-pound bonuses as they profited from pollution. That ended when the Conservative government was defeated. We are putting the water companies under tough special measures, and we're going to focus them on serving their customers and the environment, not themselves.
Sir Julian Lewis.
Does the Secretary of State think that the situation might improve if Thames Water executives were obliged to sign up to performance-related pay?
Secretary of State.
It's a very interesting proposal, and I hope he will suggest